You are listening to Financial Sense, the podcast that answers real questions about money and your business, two of the most important topics in your life. Recorded and brought to you by National Bank of Arizona, the only bank you need. Hello, I'm your host, Brent Cannon, Executive Vice President and Director of the Community Bank here at National Bank of Arizona. On this podcast, you'll hear from real bankers. My guest today is John Lewis, our Business Banking Manager for National Bank of Arizona. John, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Today's topic will be just because you can borrow doesn't mean you should borrow. That may sound crazy coming from a banker, but too often in my career, I've watched businesses that had the ability and capacity to borrow. Turned out that in the long run, they probably shouldn't have borrowed, or they should have been much more selective in their borrowings. Have you ever had experience with businesses in your career where the company had the ability to borrow and you maybe gave them some advice, counsel not to borrow?
Yeah, I have. You know, what's interesting with some small businesses is they'll approach us and say, I want to know how much money I can borrow. You know, they're always looking for the biggest amount. And it's very important to take the time to sit down with them and say, okay, what is this need for? And what is the end result that you're going to get from this borrowing?
Right.
And where we've run into problems is where they want to just keep on spending and borrowing on things that aren't going to result in cash flow.
Right. You know, often you hear the argument for borrowing that it's that, you can take your effective tax rate from the dollar of earning and therefore it's a tax savings. Well, true, but it also comes with a little thing called a promissory note.
That's right.
Right?
That is right. So the two things are going to happen when you make that purchase. Either you're going to deplete some liquidity because you're going to buy it with cash,
right,
or else you can get a loan and that payment doesn't go away.
Right.
Even though you save a little bit of money on taxes, that payment won't go away for quite some time.
So what are some of the reasons that small businesses often obtain debt? Tell me some of the uses that they're out there getting debt for.
A lot of it is to support growth or expansion. We see quite a bit where people are looking to buy their own real estate, so they're not having to lease anymore. But a lot of equipment, a lot of inventory. Yep.
Transportation equipment, et cetera. Assets generally that they need to grow their business. Businesses will obtain loans to fund the asset growth. Yep. But they'll also use funds to support their company, known as working capital loans.
Yep, absolutely.
So tell me in your experience, or tell us about a time when you've met with a company or worked with a company that seemed to have more of an affinity for growing their assets than growing their revenue.
Yeah, and I have seen that over time where people will become, I don't know if it's infatuated or they like the fact that they can buy these new pieces of equipment. I think that's a good example where sometimes people see the new equipment, I can go out and buy this equipment. It's going to make things more efficient. It's going to, at the end of the day, it's going to save some money. But sometimes I've noticed that they get focused on buying that new equipment rather than the end result.
Right. What's interesting is, I think what businesses really need to keep in mind is although they may be in a period of top line or revenue growth today and things are looking really good, the major mistake that so many small businesses make is they believe that trend line is going to always continue upward. And any business that came through the last recession or recessions before that and survived know that that's just simply not the case. So if you just kind of think of it in terms of like this, if you understand your revenue and ultimately your earnings are going to have some variability and volatility, when you place fixed payments like big loan payments that are fixed until the loan is paid off, when you place that on the business, there is an added element of risk.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's always going to be there.
Right.
Even if revenues drop, less contracts, less customers, that payment's not going away.
Right.
And so you have to be prepared for. They have to build in some cushion.
Right.
I think it's important to remember that cushion needs to be there, and that those assets are really going to help pay you back.
Speaking of the cushion, to the loan specifically, we have a term in the business called loan to value, and generally speaking, on a piece of equipment, we have some margin or equity or cash amount that the business owner will put down, whether it's an equipment purchase or a land purchase or a building purchase, and we'll ask them to put some of their own equity / cash into the deal. Why do we do that?
A couple of reasons. One of the main things I look at first is that it shows that you have a vested interest. You're confident in yourself that you're going to be successful in what you're doing.
Right.
You're putting yourself on the line in addition to the bank being put on the line. I think that first and foremost for me, I think that's important.
Right.
Secondly, we're obviously more comfortable when we have a loan that is secured by some type of collateral, and if we're end up in a position where we have to take that collateral back at some point in time, we want to have a little bit of cushion, because if we're selling it, it's probably going to sell for less than what it would be on the regular market.
Right. So really, when we look at a business and the overall risk profile of a business, we oftentimes will provide some advice to a business owner that hopefully helps them keep a balance between debt and equity, mm-hmm. and then also specifically beginning to build up cash reserves.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think of one specific example where I have a client that came to me. I would say it's about 6 years ago, and we started working together. And this business was growing at that point in time. Their revenues were around $8 million, and they kind of explained what their goal was.
Yeah.
And we sat down. We set specific financial measures that we wanted to see them achieve to be able to retain that liquidity to grow their balance sheet.
Right.
And over time, because of that discipline, that client has grown their revenues from $8 million, where they would probably be about $40 million this year, and their balance sheet is in very good shape, where if they wouldn't have had that discipline initially, they probably would have a lot of debt that would have made it a lot more difficult for them to grow.
Wow, that's a really, really good story, and really, I think, provides a great template for businesses that are in growth mode, and the importance of really maintaining the equity side of the balance sheet.
Yep.
And of course, that means really managing the debt side.
Yeah, you have to be very disciplined to be able to do that.
John, talking about this concept of just because you can borrow doesn't mean you should. Are there any industries or types of businesses that you've seen in your career that are more that have a greater affinity to buying what they don't need?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of good examples. One of the things that comes to me is contractors. Construction's a asset-heavy business. It takes assets to be able to get projects done.
Right.
But in the contractor world, I think there's been times as bankers where we've driven around a lot, and there's a lot of yellow iron sitting out there. That's just
contractors love their yellow iron.
That's right. They've accumulated over time, and they want to keep on buying more, and sometimes for good cause. But other times it seems like that they can just keep on wanting to borrow because they have the ability to borrow to get more and more of that shinier equipment.
Right.
Secondly, I think a lot about a lot of physicians that I've worked with over the years who have the capacity to borrow because they have a nice income stream. And so then they decide to use that capacity to go and borrow against something that's not necessarily related to their business.
Practice.
Yeah. And that can be dangerous because they're paying for something that's not giving them any return, and sometimes something that they don't have an expertise in, so it makes it kind of difficult.
Yeah, it really goes to having a vision and staying clear on what you're trying to do as a business owner. And in this case, in a doctor's example, that's really, really important. And when you start financing and leveraging many other types of businesses, then it becomes pretty difficult if times aren't always as great as they are today.
Yep. So I think as we look and work with clients and look at their financial statements to see what's happening, you'll see from the contractors, you'll see a growth within their assets, with quite often correspondingly also their liabilities are increasing.
Right.
And sometimes it gets to a point where their liabilities just are never going down because they continue to get more and more of this equipment and more debt. And so it's a good opportunity to sit down and discuss that and identify, what the true need is.
So on this topic, so interesting to me, just because you can borrow doesn't mean you should. How do you have those difficult conversations with a business owner who has capacity and is just absolutely sure that that's the right decision? I mean, you have any stories or examples of having some of those tough conversations? Because, ego can play a big part of this.
Yeah, absolutely, it can. I was back visiting an area that I worked in previously a month or so ago, and a client was there, and he said, "Hey, are you being nice today?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm being nice today." And he said, "Remember that time we sat down and you just told me I just need to pay all this stuff off?" And I said, "Yeah, it was that time. It was going through the recession. It was difficult times." And he laughed and said, "Oh, just make sure you're nice to people today." And we still have a great relationship with him. It was a tough time to get through that.
You probably helped him save his business, to be honest.
Yeah, it's sometimes business owners, it's their blood, sweat, and tears. They have everything they have into this thing, and having another perspective is helpful sometimes.
Right.
And as we develop strong relationships between banker and customer, then you can have those candid conversations without being offended by each other. So
yeah, I think that's what we bring to the table, right? Yep. At National Bank of Arizona, providing a personal relationship and really truly caring about the businesses and people that we have the opportunity to work with. And this is one of the ways we do it. We have tough conversations. Yeah. And oh, by the way, conversations that don't necessarily help us drive our revenue, which anybody who understands a bank knows that we make loans, we collect deposits, and we make loans. That's effectively banking, and we make money on the spread. And so when we're saying to a small business, hey, maybe you shouldn't borrow this money, maybe you should use the cash reserve or just hold off, that doesn't necessarily help us in the short run. But we're not about the short run. We're with these small businesses for the long term.
That's absolutely right. We want to see them have success many years from now, not worried about doing a loan for them today.
That's right.
It's about helping them grow and be successful.
Not only kind of taking it from the business owner running their business and preparing it for the future, but also this really plays into the whole concept of building transferable value. Yeah. If when a business comes in and is fully leveraged, and the revenues are growing and maybe earnings are even doing well, at the end of the day, businesses more times than not are worth what they earn as opposed to what they have on their balance sheet.
Yeah, I agree. That's so important, and what they're earning, and then they're also keeping their leverage low. Just recently, we had a request come in. It's a company that has banked with us ever since I've been at the bank, and so I've seen these people work extremely hard to get where they're at today, and I've seen them decrease their debt and get in a really good position. So today they're nearing retirement. They have a company that's basically debt-free and still has good cash flow. And so they're going to be able to sell that business and be able to have a very nice retirement and allow a new business owner now to come over and run that business.
That's great. Boy, those are the kind of success stories that are fun to be a part of as a banker. In fact, I don't know about you, John, but for me, that's really why I've stayed in banking for now north of 30 years, is to get to be a part of so many small businesses and their success, albeit, a small part. The businesses out there are building the businesses, but it's sure fun to watch and be a part of.
Yeah, definitely the most exciting part of the job. It's so great to be able to take part of that with the client and see them have success. It's why I do what I do.
Right. So you're hearing it today, folks. Two bankers that are saying just because you can borrow doesn't mean you should. But in all seriousness, take a long, hard look at how you're financing your balance sheet, and don't always assume that the trend lines are going up. Be prepared for the rainy day, and your business will thank you for it in the long run. Thanks, John.
Thanks.
If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe. And as always, follow us on social media, and feel free to leave comments, ideas that we can use for future podcast topics.